At a time when digital transformation is a top priority across the globe, it's important to stay on top of emerging technologies, business trends, and strategies. VMware's Partnership Perspectives podcast brings together top global business executives, technologists, and industry analysts to share insights, perspectives, and inspiration for top-of-mind topics. Hosted by VMware's Kathleen Tandy, we'll discuss stories around organizations' challenges and successes, as well as strategies for moving their businesses forward. Guests include Oracle, Lumen, ComDivision, IDC, Galaxy, and more. Have a listen.
FCO, NTDO 212, com check.
DPS, go. Inco, go. PUS, go. Surgeon, go. Booster, go. Copy that. We have a go from you guys.
Talking sound.
Because everybody's gonna say, I don't like the way that my voice sounds. I just want to sound like my favorite singer. But the truth is that many people don't like the sound of their actual voice when they first start off. And that's because it doesn't sound like our idea of what our favorite singer sounds like. It sounds like us. And if you've ever listened back to yourself on your voicemail,
the audio
or
from
yourself on a recording,
video from Ramsey Studios on YouTube. This video has over 1 million views, folks. RamseyVoice.com. Matt Ramsey, founder and vocal instructor, is our guest today to talk about voice instruction, how to take care of your voice, how to make sure that you're able to hit the ranges you need to hit. And even if you're like me and spend a lot of time behind a microphone talking every week, even nowadays in the world of Zoom audio, stuff like that. How do you take care of your voice during long Zoom sessions for meetings, for production meetings, that kind of stuff? It can get rough. So we're going to be talking to the amazing Matt Ramsey today from RamseyVoice.com about vocal care, taking care of your voice, and some vocal techniques that you can use for singing, speaking, everything else. Right after the messages from our sponsor, Podcast Cadet. Have you considered starting a podcast? Looking for a way to make your business a voice of authority in an industry? Then Podcast Cadet is the solution for you. Whether starting a podcast for yourself, your brand, business, school, church, or just plain fun, Podcast Cadet is here to help you navigate the waters of the podcast industry. Specializing in one-on-one consultation and training with industry professionals in fields ranging from podcast technology and editing to distribution, monetization, and even social media strategies. Podcast Cadet tailors their services to the specific needs of you and your podcast. Do you already have a podcast and trying to find ways to engage and grow your audience? Sign up for your Podcast Cadet audit today and let us help you explore new and exciting ways to leverage your content and elevate your podcast brand to whole new levels. From consultational workshops to affordable podcast production and maintenance packages, Podcast Cadet is your one-stop shop for everything podcast related on the internet. Visit podcastcadet.com today to sign up for your consultation or training and use code TALKING20 to save 20% off your entire purchase. That website again is podcastcadet.com. That's right, folks. And while you are online checking out podcastcadet.com, full disclosure, I am one of the founders of Podcast Cadet. I helped found that because I spent years in production and saw a lot of really good friends getting really bad advice when it came to starting podcasts, branding shows, things like that. So I teamed up with some folks that were social media people, that were fellow producers, editors, that kind of stuff. And we were like, let's start helping people navigate those murky waters. It's been fantastic. We actually just went and spoke at Comicpalooza in Houston this weekend. Mad thanks to you guys. That was a epic panel, doing a shortened version of our podcast boot camp. And we probably had about 50, 60 people sitting there on the convention floor enjoying that. So thank you guys so much for that. While you're online checking out Comicpalooza and, of course, Podcast Cadet. Make sure to stop on by our other sponsor, True Hemp Science. True Hemp Science is where you can go to get your favorite CBD products. I have been using all of the products by True Hemp Science for the last many years on the road. My doctor prescribed CBD to me as a supplemental for my anxiety. True Hemp Science is based right here in Austin, Texas. Everything is organically made, full-on spagyric process where they use every part of the plant, and then everything that's left over, they destroy that and then refilter it. Absolutely amazing. Their stuff is fantastic. Stop on by True Hemp Science today. Use the code TALKING7 to save 7% off your entire cart of $50 or more, and get two 25 milligram edibles for free. True Hemp Science is the website. TALKING7 is the code that you want to use. Our guest today is the amazing Matt Ramsey, vocal coach and founder of the amazing website, Ramsey Voice Studio. Matt Ramsey, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hey, Chris, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh, man, I have been excited about this episode. We have crossed paths numerous times over the last many years. I know you did some work at the theater that my wife managed here in town in Austin a while back, and that was like right as you were starting everything.
Yeah.
I remember like you were really like, I think I'm going to go with this voice thing like full time.
Yeah. That was an interesting kind of turning point in that. So, you know, for the other people that are listening to this, maybe doing kind of creative stuff as well, it's really difficult, I think, sometimes to make that leap towards, okay, I am going to do this, you know, entrepreneurship thing. And so it's funny that that we kind of crossed paths around that time, because that was right around the spot where I was like, okay, I don't know how this thing's going to work out. You know, I've got enough for a couple months rent left in the bank account, but I'm gonna just do my darndest and try to make this thing happen. And luckily, we've been pretty successful with it.
And you know, what's great is that you actively define your level of success. That's what I love, because there's people that are like, yeah, you know, I want to be able to go out and have a boat and everything else. And then there's people that's like, hey, if I can pay my rent and my bills doing what I love doing every day, mission accomplished.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. You define what is successful to you. And for me, I mean, it was just at that point, it was just quitting my job waiting tables. So, you know, mission accomplished.
Yeah. And even now, you know, like I was saying in the intro, to the point and to the tune of millions of views on some of your videos on Ramsey Voice, you have become one of the online authorities for this information when it comes to YouTube and other platforms. And it's great to see you, like you said, going from waiting tables to within 5 years, achieving those accolades and acclaim.
Right. And, you know, what's kind of funny about that is you have to be doing that all at the same time. Right. It's not just like, okay, one day you wake up and you're like, okay, it's time that I'm going to go and pursue this dream. I think that, you know, you really have to be working on both of them at the same time. And one of the things that I admire about you, Chris, is like you're a serial entrepreneur, man. You've got a lot of irons in the fire. You're doing a lot of stuff.
I own like 18 forges, dude. Like, it's insane. I was actually accused of that, being a serial entrepreneur not too long ago. I was just talking with that guy earlier this morning, my good friend Craig Hubbard of Epic Sales, whenever I brought him on board when COVID hit to kind of bring Podcast Cadet up to a new level and visibility on Google, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
absolutely.
We sat down. He was like, you know, just send me like a roadmap of what HC Universal is all about, you know, because there's my HC Universal LLC, and then everything else is DBA subsidiaries underneath that umbrella. Mm-hmm. And when he saw that, he was like, wow, I don't know how you find the time for all that.
Yeah.
He's like, I can't even. He's like, you've got like 6 different things going on. And they're all related in some way, shape, or form, and they are all like utter niche little things that whenever were like part of my industry, like Austin Hot Mods, my pedal modification company. Like, I worked with musicians for years that were broke and could only afford like pawn shop pedals, but they wanted a unique sound, you know? So I filled a niche of people that wanted that and couldn't afford like sending their pedal off and waiting 8 months and paying more than the price of the pedal to do it.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and you got to find those spots and try to be that person that kind of fills in that need.
Yeah. Well, and once again, remembering that root as an artist, I think someone like you, Matt, and let's kind of start disassembling, so to speak, the path of Ramsey Voice Studio and how you got onto this path to begin with. Because obviously singing music, things like that, are something that most people are rooted in and the rest of their life revolves around it.
Yes.
At some point.
Yes.
And like you said, it's finding that moment where it's like, you know, I have the opportunity, I'm going to do it.
Right.
And I think it's so important that, you know, you're still close enough to the fact that you were still waiting tables 5 years ago to fully have that grasp and heart still, you know?
Right.
And hey, I spent years on the road doing what I do, but even the last year of COVID and being locked away and doing shows via remote, like literally running Zoom meetings from my home for people, stuff like that has been like a soul crushing experience professionally, and really redefined me as a technician, you know? And I think that this path kind of defines a lot of people. And I think a lot of people are scared because they get defined by their day job and not by their passion.
Right.
And I think a lot of that might just have to do with not really seeing that path of I'm going to take a step. So,
right.
Let's get into how you got into the world of voice practicing and voice instruction.
Yeah, well, it wasn't a direct path at all, but so I actually went to school for advertising. During college, I went to Virginia Commonwealth University, and I graduated with a degree in advertising. Now, I'd been playing music since I was 13 or 14 years old, and I had been asked by the different punk and screamo bands back in high school to sing for them and stuff like that. But I never actually learned how to use my voice correctly in any way. Now, I went to school for advertising, and the summer after that was one of the most depressing summers of my life. I mean, just to give you a little perspective, it was 2008. The country was going through a rough time right then. I couldn't even find an unpaid internship to get started. And so I was waiting tables at the Jefferson Hotel, which is this historic hotel in downtown Richmond. A lot of fancy folks go there. And it was the breakfast shift, and one of my tables, they had all of these folders out. They were looking at all these different graphs and stuff like that. And I was like, "Oh, what do you guys do?" And they're like, "Oh, we're an advertising agency from San Francisco." And I was like, "Well, I don't know if you guys take interns, but I'm your next one." And indeed, they did not take interns, but they made an exception for me. They brought me out to San Francisco. And, this is kind of one of those funny things because it can at sometimes feel like everything is going right, like the universe is opening all these doors, and you're just like, yes, 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 yes. And so I landed in San Francisco, and the next 3 months were some of the worst months of my entire life.
Oh, God.
I mean, it was a real grind to actually be working in a real advertising agency where everybody was stretched so thin because of the recession and, layoffs, all this stuff. They didn't have the bandwidth to kind of, nurture somebody that was brand new at this. And so at the end of this 3 months, I was decidedly not hired. Definitely not hired after this internship. And my boss told me, or my supervisor said to me, he was like, I feel like you like to talk a lot about doing this kind of work, but I didn't actually see you doing a whole lot of this work. And I mean, it was one of the roughest meetings I've ever been in, but I'm very, very grateful to, his name's Christian, to Christian for doing that. Because it made me start thinking, I was like, wow, if that's kind of the hardest that I could try at something and still fail, then what do I really want to do? And so that was when I decided, man, music has always been there for me. I really wanted to pursue this. So I started playing at every coffee shop gig, every, art gallery opening, playing in the train station every day, just trying to kill my fear of performing in front of people, because I keep in mind, like, I'd only played in like punk and screamo bands, and now I was playing like, folky Americana, singer-songwriter, some lighter rock and roll kind of stuff. That was the way that music was taking shape for me at that point, the music that I was writing. And I'll tell you, you learn a lot about your voice singing for a couple hours in a train station. I mean, people throw shit at you. People throw stuff at you, I should say.
That's okay. That's okay. You can curse. That's a real and raw moment in life, man.
It was a real moment. Let me tell you. And inevitably at the end of 2 hours every day of singing, your voice would just be totally shot. And so I was like, wow, I really have no idea what I'm doing with my voice here. Yeah. I should probably learn. And so I started taking voice lessons for the first time, found a fantastic teacher, moved to Austin. And within a year of working with him, he was like, you just figured out what I was doing with your voice. You figured out why I gave you this exercise or whatever it happened to be. He was like, why don't you just start teaching this stuff? And I was like, no way, man. I'm going to be on the road, selling, platinum albums and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm just doing all this till my album drops.
That right, exactly. and then I decided, you know what? I'll just give it a shot. Maybe he's right. Maybe I'll just try this with some of my friends. So I started teaching a couple of my friends for free, and I discovered that I absolutely loved teaching, and it's just been, nonstop. I mean, that decision was the one of the many, many, many thousands of decisions that have led me to where I'm at right now. But that was the key moment. And, for the people that hear this kind of story, they can be like, oh, wow, you discovered your passion, you followed your dream, all that stuff. Yes, that is all true. But then you also have to work just crazy hard to make that continue to happen for you in order to, keep going. Because even when I decided that I wanted to become a voice teacher, I mean, I was still waiting tables. So yeah, it wasn't immediate,
Well, no. You still got to pay bills. And
right.
And until those two offset each other, until you are making at least an equal distribution of money instructing or doing whatever you want to do passionately as what you do in your day job.
Right.
And what's interesting is many seasons ago, I want to say probably season 2 or 3 of this show, one of my most popular episodes on YouTube was 10,000 hours to be a professional.
Right.
And I broke it down on screen, and it was basically doing something like 25 hours a week, 30 hours a week for like 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
So if you think about those passionate individuals that are out there waiting tables during the day and going out and playing every night, going like, yeah, they are definitely putting that time in. And you doing the same thing to build up Ramsey Voice Studio in the meantime while you had a day job was no different.
Yeah, and if you look, I mean, I think, you know, a lot of people bring up that Anders Ericsson study with the 10,000 hour rule, and Malcolm Gladwell, you know, points out in his book just this moment about, you know, deconstructing where the Beatles got their 10,000 hours, you know, playing 8-hour gigs in Hamburg before they were anybody.
Before they were the Beatles.
They had a different drummer, you know, all this different stuff. And so what's really interesting to me, Chris, is when I get students who take a lesson for the first time and they are brand new. They are brand new to this thing called singing, and they're exploring their voice, and it's a beautiful thing. But they have this moment that they're like, so how long is it going to take me to get good at this thing? You know, like you think a month, 2 months, 3 months. And it's like, why don't we just, let's revisit that question after a year. And as soon as you say that word year, all of a sudden you see their expressions go blank. And it's like, well, what did you expect? You know, because not only is singing this kind of thing that's a little bit difficult to, because if you watch a guitar tutorial on YouTube, you can see where to put your fingers. You can kind of get an idea, but it's not like you can watch a YouTube video and figure out, you know, oh, if I put my fingers here on my throat, all of a sudden I'm hitting that note that I'm supposed to be hitting.
Yeah.
There's so much trial and error with singing. And so oftentimes that exploration of like, oh, that's it? That's the feeling I'm supposed to have? You know, that's the stuff that takes time.
Well, and I think a lot of that especially comes down, much like with guitar and other instruments, it comes down to that nuance in playing, and even like nuance in how you stand, nuance in your posture.
Totally.
Same thing when you're playing guitar. Like if you are properly holding the neck of a guitar, it is 3 times easier to play.
Yes.
But it's that rote habit of putting your thumb in the proper position in the back of the guitar and putting it there all the time, every time.
Right.
And that takes a long time to muscularly train your mind and your body to do regularly.
Right.
To
trust that you're not going to screw it up.
Yeah.
You know, because it is easier to hold your thumb around the neck of the guitar.
Totally
and, you know,
lazy and easy. That's how I play.
Right.
I'm not gonna lie, I do. One of my very good friends, Tom Metz, teaches guitar, and anytime that we're just like in the living room jamming, he's like, "Man, that just must hurt after a little while, huh?" Yeah. I'm like, "You have no idea."
and to bring it back to singing. I see the same thing happen all the time with people that have been, you know, they just they just yell up for their notes like crazy, and it's just like, wow, that must hurt. I mean, that's gotta hurt after, and you know, and of course it, you know, they're flat, and you know the tone is bad and all that stuff. Now, there are many singers that after years and years and years of doing that, they can make it sound the way that they want them to, but it's so much easier to just learn the right techniques the first time.
Having those techniques is what's so utterly important, and that's what I love about your video series that you have done with Ramsey Voice Studio, is that you teach these general principles that can be picked up so fast by anybody, that if you take that 1 hour a day, the same hour that you would take to noodle around on your guitar watching Simpsons just to run scales, you know, or practice chord fingerings, whatever, like, you can do the same thing with your voice.
Yes. One of my teachers said this really awesome thing one time where he was like, if you think about it, the vocal cords can only do 4 things. They can open, they can close, they can stretch, and they can slacken. That's pretty much it. Everything else, I mean, if you break it down into the basic elements of what the vocal folds can actually do, they can open like a kind of sound like that's just breath passing through. That's the vocal folds open. They can close, like if I go, that's the sound of the vocal cords closing. They can stretch to sing up to a high note, like a wee, or they can slacken and thicken to create that really full kind of sound. And everything else is nuance, just like you said.
Yeah. It's what you're doing with your vocal cavity, your mouth, your tongue, your lips.
Oh, yes.
Everything else, and how those work in concert together.
Right.
Let's start getting into a couple of those principles of specifically even before performance, whether it's sitting behind a microphone for stuff like this, whether it's going into a studio or going out live. What are some things that people can do to kind of help themselves out prior to performance? Because I think probably out of my years of stage work as an audio engineer, that was some of the stuff that, man, that I worked with a lot of screamo bands. I worked with a lot of metal, things like that. That didn't concern me about people's voices so much as like what I saw people doing prior to performance. You know, like, I'm going to sit outside and smoke butts for an hour before I go on stage. Yeah, give me one more, give me one more White Russian.
Yeah, of course. Well, yeah.
Like, let's have some more coffee and cream.
Exactly.
Before we go on stage,
if there's any way if there's any way that you can mix, liquor, tobacco, lactose all together and gluten all together in a drink. That's exactly
let's
the
have
way
a couple Red Bulls and vodkas and half a pack of smokes and go perform for an hour and a half. Well,
the first thing that I would say is like there's some kind of just kind of prerequisites that I think are really important. Obviously, people, these are going to sound boring, but they are very fundamentally important. You need to have good rest, i.e. you need to, have a good, 7-8 hours, whatever your body needs. You're going to know the difference because your body has a lot more important things to do than help you sing. Singing is not important from an evolutionary perspective. It's a very, very delicate dance. And so if you are not rested, your body is going to prioritize other things like your metabolism to keep you alive, and it's going to draw away some of the focus that you would be able to place on singing. So you need to have good rest. You need to have good hydration. They say typically 2 to 3 liters of water a day is good. That's kind of an average between both males and females, or those who identify as males and females. I would say that's probably a little bit on the low side. 2 to 3 liters, I think, is a good starting point. You could even go up a little bit more than that, and I think you'd be good to go. They say you want to sing wet and pee pale, right? You want to be so hydrated that your pee is pale, because that is probably going to be a good place. That's going to signify that, you are cleaning the vocal cords. They call it vocal hygiene. It sounds kind of gross, but basically when you drink that water, you're actually cleaning them from some of the mucus and the allergies and all the stuff that hangs out on them. And that's going to keep you sounding really clear. You also want to watch your diet. We were kind of touching on this a second ago with some of the stuff to avoid. You definitely want to avoid smoking, want to avoid alcohol, because alcohol is going to kind of make the vocal folds a little inflamed. It's going to kind of puff them up a little bit. And that's a reaction against they're trying to protect you. They're trying to keep you safe. And the same thing is true of smoking. You're going to secrete more mucus on your vocal cords by smoking. And again, that's your vocal cords trying to protect you. They're like, what is this foreign matter? We better secrete a lot of stuff to protect us from this. Yeah. And so avoiding those activities will make sure that you're staying in a better place anyway. And then, of course, as far as things to do as far as diet, you want to avoid stuff that's going to give you any acid reflux or any allergies. And by allergies, I'm not even talking about necessarily sinus allergies, but also, body allergies. So a lot of people have a sensitivity to dairy, eggs, gluten, lactose. Dairy and lactose is a little redundant, but you get the idea. And I definitely include myself in that category. So if I know I'm going to be singing, then having a bread bowl of clam chowder is probably not going to be the best thing for my voice.
Yeah. Yeah, precisely.
Right. And then I think the final thing to kind of put in there, and this is where I spend most of my time, is warm up vocally. This is a hugely important thing that I don't see enough singers do. As a matter of fact, I was in the studio of a really, really famous rock band, and the lead singer walked out the door, and the bass player was like, yeah, he doesn't warm up. I can always tell. The first 3 songs that we play live, they're always rough, and then he starts to kind of hit a stride. And I'm like, wouldn't it be so great? In my mind, of course, you don't want to talk back or anything, but in my mind, I'm thinking, wouldn't it be great if you had warmed up before so that you make that good first impression right off the bat? Yeah. And that's something that I'm always, I warmed up before our interview here, so that my voice is right. I haven't been teaching any singing today, so my voice was definitely cold, even though, it's the middle of the day.
Yep.
And I've had a breakfast meal, and I've gone to the gym and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that would be enough to warm up your voice, but if you're going to be doing a lot of activity with it, what a warm-up is going to do for your voice is, number one, it's going to thin out any mucus secretions on your vocal cords. I promise that's the last time I'm going to say mucus, unless you cue me again, Chris.
No. Snot it up, buddy. Snot it up.
Let's snot it up. It's going to thin out those secretions, and number two, it's going to supply more blood flow to the vocal cords. And so that means that they're going to vibrate better, fuller, and in a much more healthy way.
Yeah.
So if you are going to do a lot of screaming, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with scream singing. There are some teachers that purport that that's totally fine. I haven't totally bought that line yet, but in my work with people that sing like that, it's more like minimizing damage. And so when you're working on...
It's working on proper technique.
Right.
It's drilling technique, because, you can absolutely hit those low ranges and go to high and everything else. You just know how to, like you said, you have to know how to minimize damage. You have to know the proper way to glissando or move from that range to the other range.
And even with screamo singers, I'll still teach them how to sing on pitch, because, I mean, that's important.
Yeah, it's still necessary.
Right. I mean, there's some what I would say is kind of like atonal, aspects to that kind of music. But one thing that I wanted to kind of bring up in listening to your podcast, Chris, is that you have a lovely speaking voice. And I think you're welcome. I think that a lot of people that hear you wouldn't know exactly why they like it. They're like, oh, he sounds like he's got a good voice. But you speak with a lot of range. And even speaking, so you'll start up here and then you'll land down here, right? Yeah. This is what I'm talking about in terms of speaking range. This is important no matter what genre you're doing, whether you're speaking, whether you're singing. Having some melody to your voice, having a range, and exploring it from the bottom to the top part of your voice is so important, because the vocal cords, in order to stay healthy, they need to unpress too. It's not just squeezing them together as hard as you possibly can. And a really easy way to kind of decompress them is by using more range in your voice. And so you'll hear with me, I talk high a lot and I'll talk low a lot. And that is preserving the instrument.
Well, and I think what a lot of people forget, Matt, and I think this is something really important to touch on right now, especially talking about technique. I thank you very much for the high compliment on my voice.
Of course.
I thank one man for that. That is Timothy Driscoll. He is no longer with us, but he was my theater director in high school.
Oh, cool.
He was the gentleman that taught me to relaxedly speak with my diaphragm.
Yes.
Not to speak from my lungs, because that's how you end up gasping for words. That's how you end up running out of air when you're doing words. It is a slow tightening and releasing of the diaphragm while you speak to keep that steady intensity going, and to, when you're on a stage, speak to the 10th row without effort.
Right.
You know.
Right. Absolutely. And a lot of people don't realize that, and I think you pointed this out earlier, is that happens, that being able to speak and project to the third or to the 10th row, whatever row, any row, is the systems of singing working in tandem, just like you said.
Yeah.
So we've got three main systems. We've got the respiration system, or your breathing. We've got the phonation system, which is the vocal cords. Think phone, think vibration. That's the vocal cords. And then we have the resonance system, or the resonation system. And that's everything above the vocal cords. That's your teeth, your tongue, pharynx, all that stuff. What your lips, what all of that is doing. And
Peacock fuels your true crime obsession with exclusive new originals like John Wayne Gacy, Devil in Disguise.
He said to me, clowns can get away with murder.
Dr. Death, the undoctored story.
This guy's dangerous.
And Epstein's shadow, Ghislaine Maxwell.
She inherited Jeffrey Epstein's secrets.
There was this whole other world going on.
Plus the most bingeable crime series, Buried in the Backyard and Snapped. And with the Dateline 24/7 channel that's always on.
Did you want her dead?
You can't not obsess. Sign up now at peacocktv.com.
At T-Mobile for Business, unconventional thinking means we see things differently, so you can focus on what matters most. That's why we've become the leader in 5G, #1 in customer satisfaction, and a partner who includes 5G in every plan, so you get it all. Unconventional thinking is better for business. Open Signal awards T-Mobile as America's fastest 5G network USA. 5G user experience report July 2021. Capable device required. Coverage not available in some areas. Some uses may require certain plan or features. See T-Mobile.com. For JD Power 2020 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
If any one of those systems is broken, then you're not going to be able to get that healthy sound that you're talking about.
Yep.
So you just mentioned, speaking or singing from the diaphragm. And many singers will, you can't see this, but like they'll lift up their chest or they'll lift up their shoulders every time they take a breath. That's not what we want. Yeah. Instead, if you want a really quick demo at home, for those of you who are following along, you just place your hand on the bottom of your stomach and just allow your stomach to come out as you inhale. You'll feel that your stomach comes out a little bit. A lot of people don't like doing this because it makes them feel fat, but this is just a demonstration. And then as you sing or as you speak, allow your stomach to come back in. And so a lot of people do the opposite. They inhale, they bring their stomach in. Well, actually, what you're doing is you're smushing a lot of important stuff in your abdomen around. And in fact, when the diaphragm actually contracts, it lengthens. It actually creates more space. And that's why it's important to allow your stomach to come out. So it's kind of, you can't see it again, but it's like a hollow bowl shape that flattens. And as it flattens, as it contracts, it's pushing down the other organs in your abdomen to make more room for your lungs, for your lungs to fill up with air. Yeah. And so a lot of people will do the opposite. They'll like squeeze, they'll contract, they'll pull, they'll suck in their stomach as they inhale, and that's actually the opposite of what we want. And without even realizing it, by just one poor technique, you've basically eliminated one of your strongest pillars in your singing voice.
Really, like the center pillar of your singing voice.
Absolutely.
The power that your diaphragm can provide. I mean, you're talking about sustained notes and power 2 to 3 times what your lungs alone can provide with the same volume of air and oxygen. It's pretty incredible once you get that down and get to the point of using your diaphragm properly. And I think there was something that you brought up that I think is a second one that a lot of people make the mistake of, Matt, and that is gasping.
Right.
And proper breathing, aside from using your diaphragm to push air, proper breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth is so rapidly important when you're breathing, or even doing what I do, speaking sometimes for 3 hours on end during a live show. Because it's that temperature variation. You have to remember that there's warm, moist air coming from inside your lungs coming out.
Right.
So if you close your mouth and breathe in through your nose, you bypass your vocal cords to your lungs. And you aren't breathing in that cold, crisp air that's in an air-conditioned space or something like that, which is causing that massive temperature variation on those very, very sensitive, fluttery vocal cords. Like you were saying.
They are very sensitive.
Oh, well, because, I mean, that's a massive temperature difference when you're talking about, like, 98.6 degrees coming out to what the average air temperature is outside. If you're gasping that air in and out past your vocal cords, that can do a lot of damage rapidly. It can dry out your vocal cords rapidly, all kinds of things.
Exactly. And just to list out one exception to that rule, in terms of singing, typically just inhaling through the nose isn't going to supply you with enough fuel to make it through your phrases. So actually with singing, typically you would inhale through the mouth. But just as Chris is saying, you do want to make sure that is a silent breath, that you're not, certainly don't want to have your vocal cords vibrating as you inhale through your throat. So no Darth Vader sounds.
And I am guilty of that. Like there was a while, and every once in a while I'll go through, I don't do a lot of editing on my shows because I come from the world of live radio and TV. But for me, there was a while that I listened back to my shows at least every other episode, the full episode through. And I noticed that I was gasping. And I was like, man, that just sounds choppy. That does not sound right. Like I can hear myself like hoping that I have enough time to get out what's in my head.
You have a lot of thoughts. You have a lot of thoughts that you want to get out. And this is something that we see with singing a lot too, is that I was actually just doing this with a student a minute ago. There's a song, do you know, it's, oh goodness, what's the name of it? Like a Stone by Audioslave, where you sing, on a cobweb afternoon in a room full of emptiness. If you don't do that verse right, you will be out of gas by the second line. And in this case, with this particular student, what I actually did was I took a set of the lyrics and I added in little breath marks to remind him where he needed to breathe, because otherwise you're not going to make it through those lines. Because at first, I mean, Chris Cornell sings that so beautifully, you're unaware of the work that goes into it. So any singers who are listening to this, if you feel that you're running out of breath, yes, definitely look at the diaphragm. Definitely check that out first. Make sure that you're putting into practice what Chris and I just mentioned in terms of allowing the stomach to relax as you inhale. But at the same time, take a look at your music too. There may be opportunities for breathing in there that you're not realizing. And again, you don't want to on a cobweb afternoon. You want it to be that slow, silent, and deep. That's what you want in your.
For me, it was literally a Post-it note. I put a Post-it note right here in front of me that was like, pace, breathe. That was it. Right. And it stayed here for like 6 months. I think my cat tore it down, and I was like, I think I'm good now. I've learned the lesson now. There's still a note on my recording system though that says press record. I do it professionally,
take anything for granted. Well, you don't want to take anything for granted, you know.
Well, and I think that's something that singers and podcasters alike tend to do. You know, we tend to take for granted that when we hit record or when we step foot on stage or behind a mic, that it's just going to be there.
Right.
And I've definitely worked with people who had like that broadcast voice, and because of their style of broadcast, now 6 years later, they no longer have that broadcast voice necessarily.
Right.
Because of how they abuse it.
Right. And you could be talking about people that are speaking in ranges and in ways that are unhealthy for them.
Yeah.
And so I had a fantastic teacher back when I was in school for advertising, and he had a voice that you would recognize if you watched any commercials from the 90s, like any of the Super Bowl ads. You would talk like this the whole time. It would just be all down here, and that's why you want to buy Cheez-Its. And you know, it was just like, wow, that is really difficult. And you know, if you follow that road long enough, you start to lose it. And it is unfortunate sometimes in both singing and speaking worlds, when you see somebody become really, really well known for a particular sound that is not sustainable, but too bad. Guess what? That's what they're paying you for, and now that's your life. And that's a position you really don't want to be in. I actually think of Brandon Flowers of the Killers, in that he was working with a great voice teacher named Jeffrey Skousen in Vegas. And if you listen to Brandon singing in the first album, it's incredibly exciting. It's a beautiful sound, but it had a lot of pressure and a lot of tension to it. And if you listen to the second and third albums and onwards of the Killers, he really changed his vocal sound quite a bit. And I think some people probably felt like it wasn't as exciting, but guess what? I mean, here they are 15, 20, what is that? Almost 20 years later.
Yeah.
And they're still singing and just sound great. And that's one of the very few exceptions that I've seen of somebody that was not forced, was not forced by vocal surgeries, was not forced by tour cancellations, wasn't forced by management to change their sound, but actually changed it for the better and for the sustainable on their own. Yeah. With you know, obviously he had a great team that was helping him through this and make that transition. But too often we see people whose voices get, you know, snuffed out by poor technique. Yeah. And then they start thinking about, oh, maybe I should get some training.
Yeah. Geddy Lee is another example like that.
Great example.
And most of that was just because of the fact that, like, hey, man, he wasn't in his mid-20s anymore.
Right.
You know, my voice does not sound like it's... Go back and listen to early episodes of Talking Sound, folks. We're in season 7 right now. I guarantee you there is a change in my voice. And that's just the fact of I'm 45 now, you know? And I remember whenever I worked the Rush show the second time here in town, one of the guys was like, they have monitors by their feet for the lyrics. I'm like, yeah, man, you write 30 years of music.
Yeah, right, exactly.
You remember all the words to 30 years of albums. They released an album every other year.
Right.
But most of their stuff later on was written in lower keys, and even most of what they performed was keyed down so that Geddy could perform those favorite songs regularly.
Right.
Without doing himself harm later in life.
Exactly. It's amazing that, I mean, Geddy, what a fantastic tenor he is. And you know, the melodies that you write in your late teens and your 20s, you're not thinking about, I have to sing this, 3,000 times over the next 20 years. You're not thinking like that.
Yeah.
And if somebody told you, hey, that's going to happen to you, you'd probably still do it. But guess what? It's very, very important to take those real considerations of where your voice sounds good, understanding your vocal range, understanding what your voice is kind of built to do, and not abusing it. And if you have to, make changes as time goes on, that's great. I've had plenty of singers where it's like, dude, you're singing way too low. Let's bring you up a couple of keys, and your voice is going to be so much happier up there.
Well, and let's get into that real quick because, I never went to broadcast school or anything, but I worked with plenty of hosts, and they kind of gave me tips here and there about kind of that classic glottal lift that you can speak with. But what are some ways that people can find that vocal range, that sweet spot, so to speak, that right key for them to speak in and sing in?
That's a great question. So let me tackle the singing first, and then I'll get to the speaking, because they are slightly different. So in terms of singing, shameless plug, I've got a fantastic tool online that you can use to find your vocal range. It only takes 6 seconds. You enable your microphone, you sing your lowest note, you sing your highest note, and it will tell you what your range is. You type in your email and it will tell you, oh, you've got an octave and a half, or you've got an octave, whatever it happens to be. And that is a fantastic starting point just to get an idea. And I cannot tell you, Chris, how many singers and people in my audience that I've had that are like, oh, I have a vocal range from like E0 up to E7, and it's like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
No, you don't. Here, try this great tool. Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, so yeah, try this tool, and just shoot me an email with the range that you find. And it's more difficult to cheat that way. And that's why I created this tool. Is I really wanted people to get an idea of where their voice is and what could be holding them back. So a lot of the times I'll see people actually report ranges that seem quite low for them. And then I'll have them in a lesson later and I'll be like, oh, fantastic. Okay, so that note that you thought was the top of your range? Well, actually, you weren't using your head voice or your falsetto or whatever the case happens to be. And it helps them. It's a journey of discovery that they figure out, oh, wow, so that's the top of my voice or what have you. So the rangefinder is a great place to get started. A general rule of thumb that I give to people is that take whatever vocal range that you find there and then subtract a fifth from it. So let's say that you find that your vocal range is from let's say a C3 all the way up to a G5, right? Now, odds are that G5 is not going to sound as good in your voice as the C3 does, the note on the bottom. By the way, if you're not familiar with these notes and the names that I'm giving them, C3 just means the C that's in the third octave. That's the octave below middle C. And then G5 is the G that's an octave above the C above middle C. So there's a C5 is the C above middle C, and then the G is a fifth up from there. And if that's really confusing, don't worry. We can always, there's plenty of diagrams online that you can look at and be like, oh, there's C3, there's G5. Anyway, so to subtract a fifth, just count down from that. So G, F, E, D, and C. So actually, if you find that your range is from like a C3 up to a G5, that's 2.5 octaves. Subtract a fifth, you'll still probably sound pretty good from that C3 up to the C5, which is if I subtract the fifth. That's a good starting place. We have a name for this comfortable range of your singing voice as voice teachers. We call it tessitura. It's a very fancy Italian term, but basically it just means a comfortable range of notes in your voice. And this is incredibly important to find. And unfortunately, there's no one-size-fits-all solution to finding out what it is. It's something that happens with trial and error and with training. So usually if a singer is in front of me, I can be like, okay, great. So your range goes all the way up to G5. But do you kind of hear how these notes up above this C here, they start getting really, really tight and squeezy and all that stuff? Well, you can't really count that. You can't really count on that being there in a song if you need it to.
And would you want it to be?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Does it sound right? Or does it sound like you're forcing it?
Exactly. Exactly. So that comfortable range of notes is really important to find. And subtracting a fifth from your range that you find on rangefinder.ramseyvoice.com is probably a good starting point to be able to do that. Now, you also asked about the speaking voice, Chris. So what's interesting about the speaking voice is that most comfortable speakers tend to speak about an octave below their first passage. What is a first passage? Well, first passage for most males and those who identify as male starts around like an E4. That's the E above middle C. That's that note right there. So if you're looking for a good place, if you're a male or identify as male, if you're looking for a good place to get started with your speaking voice, try speaking right around there. That's the E3. Yep. That's the octave below that E4. So start around there. That's even a little low for my voice. And you'll hear both Chris and I, we speak in octaves. We're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
We'll go up an octave, down an octave. But if you're looking for a place to get started, just an easy spot to get started, E3 is probably a good bet for most males. And for most females, an octave below their first passage, the female first passage, tends to start around an A4 right there. So looking an octave below that, speaking right around there. Now, I can speak comfortably right there. I can speak there for, hours and I'll be fine. I'm a higher tenor. And so it works for me. But this is why trial and error and experimentation and kind of discovering your voice is so, so important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think really not just discovering your voice, but being comfortable and okay with your voice. Being comfortable and okay with not just the range that you're in, but the ranges that you can't hit.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because, hey,
self-awareness.
There's ranges that you can't hit, and that's okay.
At a time when digital transformation is a top priority across the globe, it's important to stay on top of emerging technologies, business trends, and strategies. VMware's Partnership Perspectives podcast brings together top global business executives, technologists, and industry analysts to share insights, perspectives, and inspiration for top-of-mind topics. Hosted by VMware's Kathleen Tandy, we'll discuss stories around organizations' challenges and successes, as well as strategies for moving their businesses forward. Guests include Oracle, Lumen, ComDivision, IDC, Galaxy, and more. Have a listen.
At T-Mobile for Business, unconventional thinking means we see things differently, so you can focus on what matters most. That's why we've become the leader in 5G, #1 in customer satisfaction, and a partner who includes 5G in every plan, so you get it all. Unconventional thinking is better for business. Open Signal awards T-Mobile as America's fastest 5G network USA. 5G user experience report July 2021. Capable device required. Coverage not available in some areas. Some uses may require certain plan or features. See T-Mobile.com. For JD Power 2020 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Right. We should have pride parades for I'm a baritone and it's okay, because everybody wants to be a tenor right now, and everyone wants to be a soprano. Everyone wants to be Bruno Mars.
Pretty
Justin
sure
Bieber.
Everybody's always wanted to be a tenor.
Yep.
Pretty sure that's always been the rage.
There's this phenomenon that I see in my studio that I call alto jealousy, which is when I have a really, really high soprano singer and she's like, oh man, I really wish that I could sing those deep low notes like Adele or, Tracy Chapman, Annie Lennox, for instance, other famous altos. And I'm like, be grateful that you have this ease to sing up in those higher notes and those higher registers in your voice, because it's not everybody. I think you said everybody wants to be a tenor. Everybody wants to be something other than their true voice type.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true.
Out of the thousands of people that I had step on my stage over the years, Matt, probably hands down, I'm getting chills right now just thinking about her. I just got a shiver. Hands down, the most talented individual that I ever saw was the singer LP.
Oh yeah. Oh wow. What a range.
Dude, she was the most drilled singer that I ever saw. Spent 20-30 minutes running the full octaves of a grand piano upstairs in the kitchen by herself. She was like a classically trained singer who studied at the Metropolitan Opera. That's why she's able to hit the ranges that she hits, but absolutely with ease and grace.
Yes.
It is absolutely phenomenal to watch her perform and to hear her. So, I mean, she's just a great example of somebody who is drilled and honed in with their voice.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she would break my rangefinder. I'm pretty sure that would be.
She is skilled, man. It's mind-numbing to watch. And a little girl, a little lady.
Yep.
Like powerhouse.
Yep.
When you hear the voice come out of her, you were like, wow. Amazing.
There is an interesting tendency that sometimes, not always, but sometimes body type can kind of correlate with a singer's voice type as well. So like I'm a short dude. I'm 5'8", relatively short, I guess. And I've got this tiny little larynx. I've got little vocal cords, and that's why I'm able to sing so darn high. And then you look at someone like Ariana Grande, and she's little lady, little voice, tiny little larynx, tiny little vocal cords, and man, those things can vibrate thousands of times a second.
Yeah.
And then you see a guy that's like 6'7", just a monster, like huge guy. Think of Shaq. Think about how low Shaq's voice is and how big of a throat, he has. And that's a huge indicator of, what a person's voice type is.
Isaac Hayes is a prime example of that.
Great example.
Now, with that being said, how important is physical fitness to all of this, Matt? Because I probably do a few thousand ounces of curls every week. That's about as in shape as I, at least right now. I've told most people that over COVID, my home has developed a bacon budget.
Yeah.
Because the amount of bacon that I would normally eat off of buffets at hotels that I'm working at has stayed the same, but now I'm at home.
But now it's at home. Yeah. Well, how do you make your bacon? That's a very personal question, I know, but how do you make it?
I'm an oven man.
Oh, you make it in the oven. You get it really crispy.
I go hotel status. Yeah, a little piece of parchment paper, a Silpat. Put it on there, let it fry in its own juice. Comes out melt in your mouth. Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've as far as I can see, there's 3 primary ways. You make it in the microwave, you make it in the pan, or you make it on a sheet tray in the oven. And so, yeah, when I have the time, I like the sheet tray approach. Yeah. But yeah, physical fitness, it's really important. Not just because your breath is going to be improved, which it will, but also because, if you're moving, then you're, all the things that are supposed to be moving in your body, like, the different kind of your blood flow and stuff like that is also going to be moving. So your voice is also going to be moving, which is a key aspect of a good vocal warm-up. So not just moving your vocal cords, but also moving, the blood and the fluids and all the other stuff that hang out in your throat. Moving that around is really, really important as well.
Well, and especially lower back, stuff like that. Like that cannot be understated or underdeveloped for singers because, it's literally the direct opposite of what you're flexing in the front.
Right.
Yes. So whenever you're flexing your diaphragm properly, like you will feel it in your lower lumbar. Like you'll feel it right there above your waistline and in your back when you're doing it right. I remember my vocal teacher years ago had me laying on my back to do breathing exercises, and she was like, when you're breathing with your diaphragm, you will feel the curvature of your back hit the floor. Mm-hmm. You'll feel it softly touch the floor as you breathe. There's that slight curve in your back. She's like, that's how you'll know that you're pulling your diaphragm, because it'll be pulling your back muscles at the same time.
And also keep in mind too that you don't, if to go all the way to the opposite side, you don't want to be Mr. Six-Pack Abs over here either when you're singing. Yeah. Like you don't want to have that much. Like if I suck in my abs, I'm sucking in my abs right now, And as you can hear, there's a little bit more tension in my voice than if I relax it. And all of a sudden, my voice just sounds a lot more open. And so, it's so important that, yes, we do want to have great support. Yes, we want to have proper muscular fitness and support. But we also don't want to be just squeezing stuff because that's going to add more tension to the throat as well. So it's all a balance, man. It's all a balance.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. I mean, top of the list there is, like you said earlier, relaxation. Get rest, step away from it, make sure that you get your sleep at night, that kind of stuff. So absolutely key.
Absolutely.
Matt, I want to thank you for the time today. This has been absolutely fun. I knew that we would have a great episode whenever we started chatting again, and I would love to have you on again and again and again. I think that we have kind of disserviced our audience a little bit by not having folks like you on regularly. I know for a long time we're getting ready to start up our educational episodes again. For a long time we did how to maintain your soundboard, things like that.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that that's so entirely important to keep putting out there, and to have folks like you out there to come on and talk to potential podcasters, talk to the people. The whole idea behind this show is kind of bringing up the next generation of engineers and podcasters, stuff like that. So to teach these principles to them, to teach these principles to engineers who work with singers on their stage regularly, or producers who work with singers, I highly recommend anybody out there doing producing for bands, get in touch with Matt. Sincerely, go take at least a good 6 months of classes from Matt. Learn the basics of singing. It will behoove your studio sessions so much to be able to talk that language with a singer, and to be able to change that behavior on the spot.
Right.
You're literally just, you may as well take a blowtorch to stacks of cash to go into a studio unprepared as either a band, and we've said that with band owners like Michael McCulco from Lucky Run Studios in Houston. Multiple shiny records up on the wall over there, and it's one of those are the bands that come in and just dump tons of money and end up with a CD that they then can't afford to get mastered, and they want to come back and redo vocals because they weren't rested the night before, or they weren't ready when they came in the studio. And sometimes that even falls to us producers, because we weren't ready to take them through that studio process properly.
Absolutely. You know how politicians talk about I'm willing to work on both sides of the aisle.
Are you? Are you?
Am I? Well, not me, but I think that it's important in the music and just in the sound business that we work on both sides of the stage, right? Yeah. With the people that are on the stage, but also the people that are managing the sound and that are responsible for, producing the music or whatever the presentation happens to be. And so the more that those different folks can start to get on the same page and start to talk to each other and not just speak in platitudes of just turn some reverb on. Singers need to learn how to speak to front of house managers as well. The more that those different groups of people can talk, the better off we're all.
That was always my slow mumble inside from the booth as somebody would ask me to throw a compressor on their vocals.
Yeah.
It was or you could just learn to sing. You could just project and
don't forget about glottal compression. Don't forget about the compression that's natural within your voice.
That's right. You could just project more whenever you need to get louder, and we could not depend on electronics to do that.
Right.
But it is interesting to see how sometimes the technical world, even the world of auto-tune, things like that, have led to almost a full-on laziness, not just on the side of engineers and producers, but on the side of artists as well.
100%. Yeah, people come into the studio singing for auto-tune. They come in used to using that tool so much that they actually sing to the auto-tune rather than singing their vocal melody the way that it is, and then maybe touching things up a little bit. They actually are approaching auto-tune. It's like if you've never played a guitar without distortion before. It's like you're going to have a very kind of biased idea of how to play guitar if you've only played with distortion. It's like if someone turns on that clean channel for the first time, you are going to be in a world of hurt.
Yeah. It may sound a little sloppier than you're used to. So, once again, Matt, thank you so much for the time. Before we let you go, one final chance for shameless self-promotion. Let everybody know where they can go to sign up for your mailing list, where they can go to book your sessions, where they can go, once again, to use that amazing... I'm going to take advantage of the rangefinder today. Whenever we're done, I was bebopping around the house for a few hours. The family was gone, so I had my music up and was warming my voice up, so to speak, across the house today. So I'll give myself the rangefinder challenge. I encourage my whole audience, whether you're a podcaster, whether you're a singer, even if you're a producer, go take the rangefinder challenge. Find out what your range is. If anything, it's going to give you a better idea of maybe how biasly you're listening to something.
Right. Yeah. For some people, it's a fun contest. For other people, it's a cold splash of water in the face. But what gets measured gets managed. So
That's
once you actually know what your range is, then you can start. Wow, that's a little bit lower than I thought. Well, maybe I should, work on expanding that a little bit more. And then you have a place to start. So I would just recommend that people check out rangefinder.ramseyvoice.com. Rangefinder is all one word. So rangefinder.ramseyvoice.com. As soon as you go there, you test out your vocal range. You allow the mic. You'll sing your lowest note, your highest note, and then you enter in your email address, and it'll tell you exactly what your vocal range is. And then there's lots of different ways to get in contact with me. But as soon as you enter in your email, you'll get a little bonus and stuff too. So that's a great place to go. But my main site is ramseyvoice.com as well.
All right, Matt, once again, thank you so much. We've got to start getting you on regularly to talk about this kind of stuff. Keep us all abreast of, latest developments with what you're doing, projects that you're doing, what we can do to better take care of ourselves, better take care of our bodies, our ears. Most people do not realize. I mean, there's a reason why it's an ear, nose, and throat doctor. They're all connected. You'd be surprised how a minor ear infection can absolutely affect the way that you're singing. How much your hearing affects the way that you sing. So much more to cover on this topic. Thank you once again for coming on and taking the time. Please do hold the line while we close things out. While you're online checking that out, make sure to stop on by the Talking Sound podcast, everybody. That's where you can find all the episodes. That's where we are rebuilding the industry news section right now with tons of new RSSs. We just had a great episode. If you are a band with a website, anything like that, we just had a great episode with Jason Bernard of CaliCube talking all about SEO optimization for bands, artists, things like that. So stop on by, check it out, talkingsound.com. Check out hcuniversalnetwork.com.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode.
Take care of yourselves and your hearing.
Sound
we'll
Podcast.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
For more episodes, industry news, and information, visit us online at talkingsoundpodcast.com. Subscribe to the Talking Sound podcast on Amazon Audible, Spotify, Spreaker, SoundCloud, iTunes, or your favorite podcast service. Get the latest Talking Sound videos on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Reach TV, or your Roku or Amazon Fire device with the APR TV app. Talking Sound is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. For more great shows and content, subscribe to hcuniversalnetwork.com today. Until next time, watch those meters, gig safely, and keep reaching for 11.
This is Talking Sound.
At T-Mobile for Business, unconventional thinking means we see things differently, so you can focus on what matters most. That's why we've become the leader in 5G, #1 in customer satisfaction, and a partner who includes 5G in every plan, so you get it all. Unconventional thinking is better for business. Open Signal awards T-Mobile as America's fastest 5G network USA. 5G user experience report July 2021. Capable device required. Coverage not available in some areas. Some uses may require certain plan or features. See T-Mobile.com. For JD Power 2020 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. At T-Mobile for Business, unconventional thinking means we see things differently, so you can focus on what matters most. That's why we've become the leader in 5G, #1 in customer satisfaction, and a partner who includes 5G in every plan, so you get it all. Unconventional thinking is better for business. Open Signal awards T-Mobile as America's fastest 5G network USA. 5G user experience report July 2021. Capable device required. Coverage not available in some areas. Some uses may require certain plan or features. See T-Mobile.com. For JD Power 2020 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.